small. Especially, it's the Super 35 version of the FX3. Oh, it's just amazing how small you can get it. Yeah, I mean, the quality is high. But it doesn't have a net.
Morning, everybody. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We have a couple more members that are coming from conference that are going to file in, and we're eager to talk to you today about the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. I want to give a special note of thanks to my ranking member, Congressman Christian Morthy, who has been great to work with on all of the things we've done in the Select Committee, but particularly on this issue, which is a complex issue. And we would not be here today with a bipartisan bill, and I would say a bill that has the support of multiple branches of our government, were it not for his team and himself in particular working very constructively with ours, as well as just the members of the Select Committee in general and members of the E&C Committee as well. This has been a very constructive conversation on a complicated issue. So we have now come together. We have 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans to introduce a bill that would prohibit TikTok from operating in the United States unless it severs its ties to ByteDance or any other entity controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. This is not a step that Republicans and Democrats are taking lightly. For months, we have studied this issue. We've listened to warnings from every major national security official in the Biden administration, the FBI director, most recently in front of our committee, the CIA director, the NSA director, the DNI, et cetera, and now is the time to act. And the message we've heard from them is that TikTok, under its current ownership structure, is a threat to U.S. national security. Before we open up the floor to questions and for other members to speak, I want to just quickly address Americans who might have some concern about this bill. Whether you're a mom worried about your kids on social media in general or TikTok in particular, or you are a college student who uses the app to connect with friends, or you're an aspiring influencer, I would say this: if you value your personal freedom and privacy online, if you care about Americans' national security at home, and yes, even if you want TikTok to stick around in the United States, this bill offers the only real step toward each of those goals. Let me explain why. TikTok is based in China. In China, there is no such thing as a private company. The ruling authority, the Chinese Communist Party, and its leader, Xi Jinping, have their hands deep in the inner workings of the company, with devastating consequences for our own personal freedoms. And in compliance with Chinese law, TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is legally required to support the work of the Chinese Communist Party. And under ByteDance ownership structure, the Chinese government has the ability to manipulate TikTok's algorithm, surveil its users, and conduct influence operations that quietly populate Americans' For You pages. This is a problem because TikTok isn't just an app for funny dance videos. It is increasingly a news source for Americans under the age of 30. And allowing a CCP-controlled entity like TikTok to become the dominant media player in America would be like if in 1962, at the height of the Cold War, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, we'd allowed Pravda and the KGB to purchase the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, and NBC. But, and this is crucial, there is a path forward for TikTok. As outlined in our bipartisan bill, if TikTok is completely divested by CCP-controlled ByteDance, if there is a separation, the app can remain in the United States. Through this bill, we want to ensure divestment, not censorship. If an entity other than a CCP-controlled entity owns TikTok, Americans can still share whatever content they like, no matter how bad the dance moves may be. But instead of being fed whatever the opaque Communist Party-controlled algorithm dictates, Americans will then have real freedom of thought and expression. And for TikTok's users, employees, and investors, I would submit this bill provides the only path for the app to continue its operations in the United States without threatening Americans' online freedom, privacy, and security. We need this bill because we simply cannot allow an app controlled by our nation's foremost adversary and competitor to take over the American media landscape. We cannot place the hearts and minds of the next generation of Americans in the hands of a communist aggressor. We must act, and I urge the rest of our colleagues in the House and the Senate and the executive branch to act now before it's too late. And with that, and with apologies for my extended remarks, I'll turn it over to the ranking member, Raja Krishnamurthy.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your team and your steadfast collaboration on this. I want to thank Kathy McMorris-Rogers, Frank Malone of ENC. I want to thank all my colleagues here, as well as the White House and the Biden administration for their tremendous input with regard to this bill. Folks, this bill is not a ban, and it's really not about TikTok. This bill is a choice, and it's a choice for ByteDance, as well as any other social media app controlled by a foreign adversary. ByteDance has repeatedly used the TikTok platform in ways that undermine not just American national security, but the interests of its users. Now, let me just walk you through 3 recent examples of how ByteDance has made false statements with regard to its connections to the Chinese Communist Party and its access to American user data. First of all, let me show you this little picture here. Dusty, could you help us out? Thanks.
I knew you'd have a chart, Raj.
I know, right?
You always have a chart.
Okay, this is a picture of the editor-in-chief of ByteDance. His name is Zhang Fuping. He happens to be the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party cell embedded in ByteDance. And he's standing next to this guy, who is the head of the People's Armed Police Political Work Department of the Chinese Communist Party. This man is the editor-in-chief of ByteDance, and he is a CCP member. So whenever ByteDance says it's not controlled by the CCP, that's false. Secondly, ByteDance says that TikTok user data of Americans is solely in the United States or in Singapore. That's false. Some of this user data is on PRC servers. On top of that, recently, it was revealed that ByteDance's China-based employees routinely access American user data, regardless of what TikTok wants. Third, ByteDance has claimed that they never target any members of the U.S. government, activists, public figures, or journalists. False again. Following reports that ByteDance accessed American data, ByteDance employees accessed the TikTok data of those very journalists to target them. Can you believe that? Let me just repeat that. ByteDance used the location data of TikTok accounts owned by American journalists to target those very journalists who broke this story. So this bill, again, is not a ban, and it's not really about TikTok. It's a choice. We implore ByteDance to sell TikTok so that its American users can enjoy their dance videos, their bad lip sync, everything else that goes along with TikTok. We ask American users of TikTok to tell ByteDance to sell the platform. And this bill provides that way. Finally, I'll say this also envisions that there are other social media apps that we can't even think about today that might be controlled by a foreign adversary, whether it's in the metaverse or in the current universe, that one day some administration, it could be Republican, Democrat, who knows, what it anticipates or faces that could use this very authority in a way to protect Americans. Thank you.
And now Representative Vlada.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it hasn't been all that long ago when the TikTok CEO was here on Capitol Hill. He was meeting with all of us in our offices. And I asked a really simple question at that time. Does ByteDance employees in China be able to access this information from American users with TikTok? Didn't get an answer. So when we had the committee hearing on Energy and Commerce, I asked the same question. Last year, I asked him again, do ByteDance employees in China, including its engineers, have access to American user data? Admitted in front of our committee that yes, the Chinese Communist Party has access to our user data. So this is, as you've already heard, this is a wake-up call and should alarm every single American, whether they're actively engaged on TikTok or not. In the months since this hearing, we've been doing our due diligence to gather the information and fully understand the national security risk posed by ByteDance. And it's become clear from the classified briefings we've had, including witness testimonies, that TikTok presents a clear and present danger to our national security and to all American users on this app. And I'm proud to stand with my colleagues today, both Republicans and Democrats, and unveil our efforts to keep Americans safe from adversaries like Communist China. I'd also like to thank the chair and ranking member of the Select Committee on the CCP for their leadership on this. But let me again reiterate, this bill that we have before us and we've introduced is very simple. It incentivizes divestment of TikTok from the Chinese Communist Party, or TikTok will be prohibited here in the United States. It also establishes a narrow framework to protect the United States against future apps controlled by foreign adversaries, which is clearly spelled out in the bill, over covered companies, which is an important step to protect Americans and our national security. And I'm looking forward to bringing this bill forward in a markup on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which we're going to have on Thursday, so we can get this passed and sent to the floor for a vote before the House of Representatives. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you. And now the pride of New Jersey, Representative Sherrill.
That's not saying a lot.
Ooh, wait a second.
Wow. Ouch. That really was.
That was not.
That was anti-New Jersey.
Which Dakota are you from again?
Thank you. Thank you. And how many people are there? Okay. Okay. Wow. Rough. I mean, we're trying to be bipartisan here. Really harsh. Really harsh. Wonderful to be here today, and I do really want to thank our chairman, Gallagher, and the ranking member, Krishnamurthy. You know, when I was invited to be on the special committee, my first question was, is this going to be a serious committee, and are we going to really work hard together to actually solve some of our nation's tough problems? And I can tell you that I think this today is an example of just how we're all working to do that. I'm speaking to you today as a veteran, as a legislator, and as a mother of 4 school-age children. And I can tell you that when it comes to media apps like TikTok, we are failing our children and we are failing our country. It's critical that Congress take action to address the national security threat posed by TikTok. I've heard far too many times that it's too popular or it's too big to tackle. You know, I'm sick and tired of hearing that argument when we know that the right thing to do for our country is to tackle this problem, then we are going to come together and do it. Why in the hell would we allow a foreign adversary like the Chinese Communist Party, a regime actively committing genocide against its own people, a regime with views antithetical to our democratic values, to control a technology platform and key source of information that reaches half of the United States population? We know that the CCP requires all domestic companies, including ByteDance, to share data with Beijing and assist its national security services upon request under its 2017 intelligence law. That means Americans' data is always at risk of seizure by the CCP, and the content our kids view can be manipulated by CCP decree. We know that TikTok has continually censored anti-regime content, such as references to Tibet or Tiananmen Square. In New Jersey, TikTok has banned users who've spoken out about China's forced labor and horrific genocide of the Uyghur people. It's unacceptable, and that's exactly why we need to divest. All Americans deserve access to information and media platforms that are free from the influence of hostile foreign actors like the Chinese Communist Party. I hope the Energy and Commerce Committee will move quickly, and the Speaker will bring this bill up for a vote to protect our democracy, our national security, and most importantly, our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Roy.
I thank the proud Congresswoman from New Jersey. But I'm glad to be here. I want to thank all my colleagues here, particularly my good friend from Wisconsin for his work on this. And look, you see a fairly broad cross-section ideologically across the conference, because I think everybody here and many more in both of our conferences recognize the importance of addressing this issue. And a lot of people are going to say this is anti-technology, or they're going to say that this is somehow a specifically anti-TikTok piece of legislation. And as you've heard here, nothing could be further from the truth, right? This is about making sure our foreign adversaries cannot be targeting Americans, American citizens, our national security, and the well-being of our citizens. Now, importantly, I want to bring up one point that we've touched on, but that I do think matters, and I will bring it up in the context of TikTok. About a year ago, I'm a recovering college golfer, and I'd never been to Augusta National. Well, a colleague invited me to go with my son, who's 14, and we went, then 13. We went down to Augusta National. If you've never been to the Masters, what you might know is that you have to put all of these away. You're not allowed to take them onto the course. You're not allowed to take cameras. So it's like you're stepping back into 1995. There's nothing. So my son was observing, and my son is we're a no-device family. But my son was looking around, and nobody was tweeting, and nobody was, taking selfies. Nobody was sitting there, texting to each other or posting stuff. Everybody was just talking. Everybody was just engaging. And he was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Yeah. I said, yeah, it is pretty cool. And here's the thing. This is purposeful, okay? Now, it's one thing when technology does that broadly, and we've got a bigger fight on that. But it's another thing when specifically, for example, according to a report, Teens and Mental Health, How Girls Really Feel About Social Media, nearly half who use TikTok say they feel addicted to the platform or use it more than intended, at least weekly. Among girls with moderate to severe depressive symptoms, roughly 7 in 10 who use TikTok say they come across problematic suicide-related content at least monthly. Same study, when researchers posed as 13-year-old users and searched and liked mental health videos, they received potentially harmful content, including about eating disorders and self-harm from TikTok every few minutes or more. My daughter turns 13 in about 3 weeks. This is a real concern, because here's the deal. China makes its teens use a teenage version with a different content. They're targeting our children, and it's purposeful. They're targeting their children with different content. Why would that be? We're just simply here saying we should have technology like this not being controlled by the CCP or our adversaries. It is that simple. I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm unapologetically a part of it, and we're just getting started. I yield back.
Thank you. And to your point, any bill that could bring together a conservative like me and a moderate like Chip Roy has got to be a good bill.
From your lips, God's ears, brother.
Congresswoman Kemick. Yeah.
What, no quips? No nothing?
Yeah, it's a true Florida woman.
That's right. Go Gators, baby. Well, good morning. I'm so glad to see this room filled because what we have to say today is so important. I want to make clear, as so many of my colleagues already have, that this legislation, it establishes a narrow framework to protect the United States and Americans against applications controlled by foreign adversaries. And perhaps most importantly, incentivizes divestment from adversarial nations. As has been stated here multiple times, it is not a ban. TikTok, it is not a ban. And I don't care how many times you want to put that out on social media, it's not a ban. But again, thank you for proving our point that you're manipulators. The CCP threat is very real, and sorry, I'm feeling sassy today. I know, I'm trying to rein it in. The CCP threat, it's very real, and it is very serious. Tomorrow, the Energy and Commerce Committee will hold a markup on this bill and a companion piece of legislation, the Protecting Americans' Data from Foreign Adversaries Act. A group of dedicated lawmakers have worked significantly, in depth, and collaboratively on this bill. And it cuts across both chambers and on both sides of the aisle. Lawmakers, as was pointed out, from all factions of the House and Senate are coming together because this is not political. This is about the United States sovereignty, protecting Americans, our national security, and our constitutional rights. Now, within hours of the announcement of this legislation, TikTok, who just happens to be the most public forward-facing entity, which again, this isn't against TikTok specifically, but any app that is owned by a foreign adversary, they came out with a statement calling it a ban, which as we have pointed out and corrected the record, it is not, and claimed that they would be fighting for Americans' First Amendment rights. Thank you, TikTok, for proving our point. You are manipulators, you don't tell the truth, and you damn sure don't give one iota about Americans' constitutional rights. The irony of the CCP claiming to stand up for Americans' First Amendment rights is definitely the joke of the century. They seem to have forgotten that they not only steal Americans' data, violate their Fourth Amendment rights regularly, but also violate Americans' First Amendment rights daily. The data proves it, and I invite members of the press to review the data that we have here. I know several of my colleagues have talked about these points, about how there's suppression of different content that doesn't align with the CCP, how it's amplified or suppressed. I'll give you some very specific numbers. When the Hong Kong protests were at their peak, there was a 180-to-1 ratio on Instagram versus TikTok. On Instagram, the hashtag Hong Kong protest was generating 132,000 hashtags. On TikTok, 762 in the exact same time period. Now, there's, on any other issue, pick Taylor Swift, whatever, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. You can see how that is completely out of whack. On COVID blame, over a 400-to-1 ratio. If you were to type in China virus, hashtag China virus, on Instagram, there were 79,353 on Instagram, 0 to be found on TikTok. When it came to Tiananmen, shock. When it came to the hashtag Tiananmen or Tiananmen Square, on Instagram, you could find in the exact same time frame 74,334 hashtags stating Tiananmen Square. On TikTok, 1,290. It goes on and on. You can see the data. It is in black and white. And I encourage you guys to share this, because while TikTok is going to try to sell an emotional appeal that they are out here defending Americans' rights, we know that they are turning content creators into foot soldiers. That is what this is about. This is a Chinese communist-controlled company complaining that they won't have unfettered access to Americans' private data, geolocations, metadata, and contacts. Remember, this is a CCP-controlled company claiming to stand up for constitutional rights while simultaneously engaging in slavery and horrific human rights abuses. We cannot forget that. And for anyone who is confused about the long-term goal, about foreign adversaries utilizing apps in America, it is so in this case specifically, China is looking to build a language model for their AI platforms to be able to use it to dictate U.S. policy. Everything that we have seen up to this point has been a beta test. That is not a conspiracy theory. The data, it speaks for itself. I never in my lifetime would have ever thought that I would be seeing Americans reading Osama bin Laden's letter to America and making excuses and apologizing and doing the bidding of our adversaries. If you think that's a coincidence, you're not paying attention. So again, make no mistake, this evidence, it is clear, it is damning. The CCP has golden shares in ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, and while this is not singularly about one company, and it is not a ban, they love to be front and center on this issue, so they've opened that door. The harder that they try to salvage their ability to infiltrate our phones and our communities and the lives of 150 million Americans plus, the more clear it will become. For them, this is not about being profitable. We know that that's Meta's goal. It's not about the money. It is about access and it is about control. The CCP and the companies they control are pissed off that they will no longer have unfettered access, and today is when it stops. So thank you for being here, and thank you to my colleagues for all your hard work on this.
Thank you. And finally, from one of the Dakotas.
Hard to know which one, really. Yeah, hard to know which one.
East Dakota.
Yes, that's right, yeah. As currently configured, TikTok is a national security threat. Now, you don't need to take my word for it. Both Energy and Commerce and the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party have done an exceptional job over the course of the last year of building that evidentiary record. Experts from one end of the political spectrum to the other have made it clear that TikTok, as currently configured, is a national security threat. A few weeks ago, I asked Secretary Leon Panetta and Secretary Mike Pompeo if TikTok was simply Chinese Communist Party malware, and they both said that it was. During the height of the Cold War, I think Americans would rightfully have been concerned if the Soviets had purchased the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times, WNAX Radio, the CBS Evening News, and the Sioux Falls Argus Leader. They would have been concerned regardless of what the content on those platforms was. They would have rightly understood the national security threat that would come from having one of our adversaries control such a large portion of the American public square. Our goal is not to shut down TikTok. Our goal is to decouple TikTok and other platforms from the malign influence and control of the Chinese Communist Party. And as the ranking member said, there is a choice. This platform does not have to be shut down. It just has to be a platform that does not serve the interests of one of America's adversaries.
Thank you. With that, we will entertain any questions you have. Oh, now do I have to choose? Go for it.
I actually have a question for Mr. Christopher.
Even better, yeah. I will prioritize questions to not me. Okay. Yeah.
No, the administration has, worked with some of you on this bill. What about, though, the concern that they've worked on trying to do something about TikTok, but in the president's campaign, he has relied on TikTok and encouraged them to use TikTok to reach younger voters? Is there an inconsistency there?
I'm not going to tell them how to campaign. I don't have a TikTok account on my personal device, and as you know, it's banned on public devices here in Congress. I would just say, look, we know what the facts are, and I would just ask people to be very careful and cautious in using it. It is legal today to use it here, even though the CCP has influence over, controls ByteDance, but I'd be very cautious.
Good.
I echo.
Can you speak at front?
I certainly echo Raja's comments. I don't have TikTok myself. My children are not supposed to have TikTok. If you're paying attention, which they're not, you shouldn't have TikTok. I think it's something that shouldn't be on any government platforms. I certainly think it's a dangerous app that can influence with Chinese propaganda our population should the CCP want to do that.
Can I say, just not that you didn't ask it to me, but I understand the desire to reach younger voters. I mean, people are in the business of getting reelected here, but in the carefully, narrowly focused bill we've come up with here, TikTok could live on and people could do whatever they want on it, provided there is that separation. Again, it is not a ban. Think of this as a surgery designed to remove the tumor and thereby save the patient in the process. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Timing. Assuming this bill is on a fast track to passage, which again is an uncertainty, it's an election year. How much time does ByteDance have to spin off TikTok? Is it like once the ink is dry on the bill?
165 days, so roughly 6 months.
Yeah. So we've. And do you want to quickly say something, Richie, or do we want to?
Richie, you want to say something?
Yeah, please, just yeah.
It's got to be good.
And then we'll get to as many questions as possible.
Make sure you don't repeat anything.
Well, as the youngest speaker here, I'm kidding. Well, first, it's an honor to be here. I'm not part of the TikTok generation, but I share the concern that TikTok has become a prohibitive national security risk that we can no longer afford to ignore. The Chinese Communist Party has no First Amendment right to control TikTok, any more than the Soviet Union had a First Amendment right to control ABC and NBC and CBS during the Cold War. As many of you know, TikTok is not merely a social media platform. It is the leading news source for the next generation. And the fact that we're putting the leading news source for the most impressionable minds in our society in the hands of our leading foreign adversary is an act of self-sabotage. It's an act of suicide. And as a New Yorker who lived through 9/11, I never thought in my wildest nightmares that I would see Osama bin Laden's letter to America trending on TikTok. So if that is not enough of a provocation to effectuate a forced sale of TikTok, I'm not sure what would be. So I'm honored to support this bill.
And when Richie and Kat are singing from the same sheet of music.
I know, that's
There's been no clear voice in Congress that I've come across in terms of combating the anti-Semitism we've seen recently. So thank you, Congressman Torres. I don't like choosing between people, but go.
Great. I'll help you choose. So Senator Warner, obviously.
I just don't know if there's like an unofficial rank structure here or like who's in charge. I'm an introvert.
How many followers do you have?
Yeah.
Not on TikTok.
Senator Warner says that he has some concerns about the constitutionality of an approach that names specific companies. I just wanted to get your response to that, as well as kind of get an understanding of why there are companies named in this legislation, and do you think that's going to have constitutional issues?
We've worked very hard, and I would invite our constitutional lawyers to comment to ensure that there's no issue with the bill of attainder. We've actually learned from the Senate experience on this, and while we do call out CCP-controlled company ByteDance, the bill is obviously about more. It creates a framework that is tied to foreign adversary control, a substantial ownership or operational control of a company. So I think it's fair to say that this is about that ownership structure and that framework, not about sort of going after a particular company. Now, that being said, based on the work we've done, the clear and present danger and the primary concern comes from ByteDance ownership of TikTok right now. And we've built up the evidence painstakingly over the course of the last 2 years to be able to make the case. If there were a future company to emerge that had that same level of concern, they would have to meet the very high bar we've established in this bill in order for there to be a divestiture contemplated. So I've had conversations with Senator Warner. I know he sees the threat clearly, and we're trying to move forward with a bill that sort of does the thing we want to do, which is address adversary ownership of an incredibly influential application while avoiding a massive grant of authority to the executive branch or a constitutional issue like a bill of attainder issue. I think we've threaded that needle. It has been the laborious work of a month of iterative feedback, but I invite any of my colleagues to comment. Yeah. Why do I have to go?
You said you didn't want to take more witness.
Yeah, right.
Let me just add for 30 seconds. Mike answered that very well on the substance of this legislation and what we've done to try to avoid those concerns and to learn from it, and talking to Warner and so forth. But also, there's a lot of latitude when you're talking about national security for the executive branch. I mean, you go look in history and Eisenhower and back to Lincoln. I mean, when we've got foreign adversaries that are interfering with our national security interests, there's a lot of latitude under Article 2 for the President of the United States to do what's necessary to protect the citizens. So remember that as a starting place for the constitutional question. Then move to the point here, which what we're trying to do is make this not targeted at a company, but at the foreign ownership of any company and how it's related to the citizenry.
I think it's a few things. One, we've learned from that experience, and there was a lot of concern on the left and on the right. We've tried to understand it and not dismiss it, and I think it's improved our product. Raja and I had a previous bill that was kind of the intellectual foundation of this. So we've learned from the failure of that bill to move forward and taken in the concerns of the Committee of Jurisdiction as well, Energy and Commerce Committee. I also think, I'll just speak for myself here, there was a lot of member concern post-October 7th, specifically about the content on the platform that renewed interest in taking action. And so I think it was a combination of those two things that allowed us to get to the moment we're at today. And I'll just finally say, as someone who's now at the end of his congressional career, such as it exists, this is kind of how it's supposed to work, right? I mean, it's frustrating when things can't happen quickly, but really we've done this over the course of a year. We've had some hits, some misses. We've gotten a lot of feedback. There were times where I wanted the White House to move faster. I wanted my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to move faster. But like through that process, we've emerged at a framework that we think is thoughtful, deliberative, focused, avoids any constitutional pitfalls, and represents a viable path forward on a critical national security issue.
Plus, let me just add, in the waning hours of his tenure in Congress, we've got to take advantage of this time left in this Capitol. But no, in all seriousness, this is also an election year. We were in Taiwan last week.
Good point.
And the Taiwanese elections were heavily interfered with by the CCP. And what was the vehicle? TikTok. And all parties complained about this to us, all the different leadership. And so this is the year when I think half of the world's population is going to participate in an election. So we should not believe that other elections would not be affected similarly. They very well may be. And so it's only appropriate that we act.
Thanks, everyone. That's all we have to say. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks. All right.